Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove and today joined by John Gibson for the match preview. Newcastle head down to St Mary's on Saturday to face Southampton, needing a reaction after a disappointing performance and result against Bournemouth on Saturday. Just gone 4-1 defeat up at St James's Park. John, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm recovering. I'm recovering from that 4-1 scoreline. I mean, Bournemouth worried me deep down inside, because they're a good side. They'd gone 10 unbeaten. But I never expected the scoreline we got. And I know when we went into injury time, it was just 2-1. But the performance and everything about it was depressing, to be perfectly truthful. But at the same time, we've won 9 of the last 10. So we can't get over sort of depressed, and a very good side doesn't turn into a poor side on one game. Although it was alarming to see as many players off the pace and off the. They just seemed lethargic and tired mentally as much as physically. But it's one game, and we've got to hope with a free week that that's out the system. And quite frankly, if you've got to come back from a horrendous game, the best place to do it is Southampton.
Or is it? Because I agree with you. My personal opinion is that it certainly is the best place to go. Bottom of the league, 6 points. The new manager hasn't picked up a single win. They are arguably the worst Premier League side that we've ever seen. I know we're not at the end of the season yet, so they might beat the lowest ever points tally. But that being said, a lot of people, John, might look at this game and go, "Oh, is this really the game you want straight after a thumping? You know, is it a potential banana peel to slip upon?"
There we've got the famous 2 words that we keep coming back to: banana skin. I mean, what do you want? Do you want me to go to Manchester City, or do you want us to go back to Arsenal for another win, or do you want us to go to Liverpool? Of course, it's the best game to come back to. We mustn't be afraid of it. If we can't beat Southampton, who everybody's beaten, I mean, then there's no hope for us in what we're thinking. We can't suddenly go from a team that won 9 out of 9 to being scared to go to Southampton, for goodness sake. If we can't go to Southampton and get the job done, there's something seriously wrong, and we've got to rethink our ambition for the rest of the season. Of course, it's the best place to go. They couldn't beat a carpet.
Yeah, and although they have had, I'll say, signs of life. I'm going to say that very lightly because really they haven't. But you know, they've not done too badly against Manchester United and Nottingham Forest in their recent games. They've still lost, mind you. But this is a game, John, isn't it? It's unthinkable that Newcastle United would dare come away with anything but victory.
Yes, of course it is. If the ambition we've got is justified, then it is. I mean, we were talking on here, weren't we? Was it the last podcast? Me saying, isn't it a surprise? Like when we were 12th, should Eddie Howe get the sack? When we were 4th with 9 wins out of 9, we got a chance of winning the title. And now we might be scared to go to Southampton. I mean, how knee jerk is all that? The middle road is where we're really at. We trying to sack Eddie Howe or suggest that his job was under any problem was totally ludicrous. Equally, trying to suggest we would win the Premier League title this season was utterly ludicrous. At the time that was said, Liverpool were 9 points ahead with a game in hand, and that's got even better. We are what we are in the middle, but all I've ever wanted to be this season is a Champions League qualifier who can win the League Cup. And both of those are still on, and we've got to push for them. But if we're going to do either of those, you beat Southampton. They are in danger of being officially the worst Premier League side in history. They've got 6 points, and Derby County are officially the worst. And their record is set 2007 or whenever it was. Their record was only 11 points for the whole season. And that was thought to be unassailable. That was going to be the record to stand for all the time. But when we reached the halfway mark, when Southampton reached the halfway mark of this season, they had 6 points. Derby had 1 point more at that stage in their disaster season. And since we reached half time in the season, Southampton have gone to Manchester United and Forest and leaked 3 goals in both games. Now, I know for 10 minutes in both games, they looked an attractive side, knocking it about. Who cares? Bottom line, they lost both of them and they shipped 3 goals in both of them. If we can't beat them, we have got to seriously rethink where our ambitions are this season. And outside of something ludicrous happening, we ought to beat them. If you compared the team man for man, outside of the young kid down there dribbling, who's not going to play because of injury, would you take anybody from their lot and put them in our lot? Of course you wouldn't. So man for man, Newcastle have the better team from 1 to 11. The only thing they've got to do is what should be the easiest thing to do, which is match them for determination, for power, for confidence, for commitment. If you do all those things, you win.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's really interesting to see the reaction from Newcastle United. The two excuses that were kind of put down at the door of Newcastle United was, one, did they underestimate Bournemouth, and two, were they fatigued? Let us know in the comments your thoughts on those two reasons for defeat. We'll start with the fatigue issue, John, because it's an interesting one. It got a lot of people talking. Bournemouth played the same amount of games and they had an injury crisis. So how, when Newcastle United, that fatigue, that right from the word go, they looked the second best team, and man for man, they were second best all over the pitch. And the secondary question to that is, with a week's break, is there any excuse to be fatigued on Saturday?
All good, both good questions. I mean, they did a job on us. Tactically, they were excellent. They were athletic. They had a great high press. They were quick. They were clinical. All the things we had been in nine-match run. I think, were we tired? I don't adhere to the feeling that we're tired physically. I think we were tired mentally. The same players had played in all the matches. They'd given a lot. They'd had to raise their game. They'd had to raise their expectations. They had to do everything to win 3 successive games on the bounce away from home against Man United, Spurs and Arsenal. I think the mental was between the ears. I think it was mental between the ears. I don't think it was particularly physical. And yes, there might have been an element of underestimating them because they were Bournemouth, a club that play in front of 11,000. That was going to be such a big mistake, and I was aware of that before the game, and I'm certain Eddie would be. They were on a 10-match unbeaten run. They are not a poor side. They are a better side currently than Manchester United and Spurs, who were lauded for beating them, but we were lauded because we beat 2 very big historic names in English football, but the teams were poor. Bournemouth team was good, and I think there was a bit of underestimating them. We were tired mentally, not physically. The week's rest, it's as much the mental rest and the coming down to earth and thinking, well, we've made a mess of that. We don't have to keep the standard up. We've got to climb back to where we were. They've had a couple of days off, which was the correct thing. Then we go again. No, there's not an excuse going down there. I mean, I wouldn't. The fact that we played Wolves in midweek was a very flimsy excuse for the performance against Bournemouth. I mean, so many big players never turned up. Isaac didn't get a kick. Gordon looked absolutely drained. Botman only made it to half time. Byrne, Joe Linton, Bruno all give the ball away. The only one that I thought really tried to put us back on a level keel was Tonali, who put fires out all over the place. His anticipation of trouble is amazing. And I think he did that job well, but so many of the big names were not at the races. I mean, you couldn't recognize Isaac from his original loading as the greatest centre forward in Europe on that display. Not only did he not get a kick, and I know his service was poor, but he seemed to almost accept it, Andrew, on the day. Oh, it's not my day, the body language. And so many others were just about the same. That's got to have ended. This has been a kick up the pants, and they've got to do something about it, and the best team you could face to do something about it is Southampton. Now, whether they'll take advantage of it is up to them, but it is the best you could ask for.
Is it kind of maybe not a good thing, because obviously we wanted Newcastle to beat Bournemouth and we wanted the win to continue, but kind of just a reminder that it's not always going to go your own way. And like you say, it's a bit of a kick up the backside, and sometimes you need to be brought back down to earth to then fly off again. And obviously, they start again, and they'll hope to go on another unbeaten run again. But maybe just a reminder that you're not unbeatable, and you will have days like this, and this is the Premier League.
Yeah, we've got to think that way because we've got the defeat. We've got to think that way, and this takes my mind back, Andrew, to the entertainers. The side Newcastle are attempting to be like now, if you like, the entertainers. And I think it was 93, albeit a division down, but they started 11 league games unbeaten. And that was culminated in a wonderful victory. I was there at Walker Park against Sunderland. Everybody was buzzing. A little bit like we had 9 games unbeaten in our last away game, and that was a wonderful win at Arsenal. Then, with everybody cock-a-hoop because they'd beaten Sunderland on their own patch, we come at home to Grimsby and lost. Newcastle come at home to Bournemouth and lost. It reminds me of that. And I hope it is like that. You know why? Because Newcastle finished that season with everything they'd wished for. They won the title, the second division title, and went into Premier League, and the entertainers were born. And if Newcastle can reach their ambition this season, which is either or the Champions League and the Carabao Cup, that would be great. But these things can happen. The difference is you've got to learn quickly from. It's got to be a jolt, like a jolt of electricity, and you've got to get up and go again. But I reiterate, we are a team of very good players. We won 9 out of 9, and losing 1 doesn't make you a bad team. But what will decide what this team is the way they react to that defeat and what they do down at Southampton.
Yeah, and I'm just looking there at the fixtures of the season you just mentioned, the 92-93 season, and they lost to Leicester after the Grimsby Town game. But then they did go on an unbeaten run of 6 games, winning 5 of them and drawing 1 after those 2 defeats. So hopefully, history doesn't repeat itself and we pick up a second consecutive defeat. But what does follow is another unbeaten run this time around. And you're right there, John, aren't you? This is the run had to come to an end at some point. And anyhow, I mentioned it in his post-game comments. It's important not to overreact. It's one game, and yes, there were elements that he would have been really unhappy with, and he probably watched them over and over again before he's got the players back into training. But it was going to happen, and it's important just to put it into context. 1 defeat out of 9, and as you say, it's now the perfect
1 defeat out of 10.
1 defeat out of 10. Sorry, it's the perfect
for
opportunity.
this current side. Yeah,
yeah. It's the perfect opportunity.
We've got to think of it that way, Andrew, and it's also facts. It is 1 defeat out of 10. I think because it was at home and because Bournemouth scored 4 goals, it really was an eye-opener for us. And by the way, because they're the best side that's come to St James's Park all season. Without a shadow of doubt, they are best side. And by the way, this is a side that didn't have centre forwards. 2 centre forwards that they have, both injured. Clivert was normally on the bench. He's normally a bench player that comes on and takes a penalty. He started because they had no centre forwards and got a hat trick and looked the world beater. Looked as good as his dad on the day. And they financially they haven't got the money we've got. They're playing for 11,000. We playing for the 52. They deserve the utmost praise, and they did a right job on us, and they've done their homework as well. But I go back again. I am a big fan of Isaac. I'm a big fan of Gordon. I'm a big fan of Bruno and Joe Linton and all the boys. And I've got to believe that they are a lot better than they were against Bournemouth. And this is the opportunity to show it again. They've already shown it in a 9-match winning run, but to show it again.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the other players have been given a few days off. Bruno spotted over in Italy, looked like he was in Lake Como for a day or so in Milan as well. So hopefully the players who have gone away have been able to reset, enjoy a bit of family time, and have come back to Benton with their mind focused on Saturday. Before I ask you about the team, John, I imagine it might be unchanged, but I'll let you confirm that in a moment. I'm just going to read you some stats and then you can jump in and have your say on them. So Southampton have won just one of their last 13 Premier League games against Newcastle. They've lost 9 and lost the last 4 in a row. Newcastle have won 3 of the last 4 at St Mary's, where it was a horrendous place to go prior to that. Newcastle have lost just 1 of the last 23 Premier League games against promoted sides. As you mentioned, Southampton have won just 1 of 35 Premier League games in this current run. And they have made 17 errors this season, which have led to a goal. So the stats paint a positive picture, don't they, John?
Hugely, because stats normally, I say, you can massage them to support any argument you want, because normally they're quite close stats and you can massage them to be in Newcastle's favour or to be in the opposition's favour. In this case, you can't massage them. How do you massage the Southampton stats into them being half decent? You can't do it. I mean, they've had a change of manager. It's brought a different aspect to their play. I mean, under Russell Martin, they were absolutely gung-ho, they were suicidal, and he lived on borrowed time. The new boy is a bit more doer. He goes for more organisation. They have looked better in large swathes of matches, but the outcome has remained the same. And, the way they are playing at the moment, we've got to go down there with the utmost confidence. That Bournemouth result was really cost us. We went from 4th to 6th. We went out of a Champions League qualifying position to 6th. And there's a lot of thunder and hooves around us. A couple overtook us, and there's a lot behind us. We've got to get back on that even keel. And this is the opportunity to do it. I mean, if we hit them early doors, how fragile is their confidence going to be? We are worried about our confidence, having lost 4 at home. What's their confidence like? Because I tell you what, even if they dodge the bullet of becoming the worst ever Premier League side, even if they dodge that bullet because they get more than 11 points this season, I tell you the bullet they're not going to dodge, Andrew, and that's the one for relegation. They're going down. They're going down. And there's no doubt. And I mean, the opening day of the season, it was only 1-0 to us against them. Now, they got away with it then. That didn't tell us anything about what was coming, because what was coming was a horrendous season for Southampton. But you've got to remember, we played for an hour with 10 men after the referee was conned to sending Shaw off when the guy went down as if he'd been felled like an ox, when really he was untouched. So that didn't show what was going to happen. But we have got, by the way, our away record, you were doing a lot of stats, is quite startling. If we win at Southampton, it'll be our 4th successive away win in the Premier League, which we haven't done since 1996. That's Kevin Keegan. But it'll actually be our 5th successive away win, because we've beaten Arsenal in the League Cup at the end of that. Now, I know what the next question is. On the law of averages, surely Newcastle United, who have had a poor away form in the past, can't win 5 successive away games. And I say, maybe they can't if they were going to Liverpool or somewhere, but we're going to Southampton, so yes, we can. Don't let facts scare us. Let facts encourage us. And we can win at Southampton. In fact, it goes beyond that. We should win, or to win. In a draw, dare I say it, for once, a draw is not good enough, Andrew.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, John. Let us know in the comments if you do indeed agree with John that it has to be a win and nothing else but victory, if Alexander Isak scores, John, he will make history by becoming the first Newcastle United player to score in a 5th consecutive away game in the Premier League, which is another feat at the feet of Alexander Isak. But we need him to be on his best form, which he wasn't against Bournemouth. Let's look at the start 11, John. I'm going to guess it's unchanged for you, is it?
Yes, I think it is. I think it is because if you go on the last game, you either drop 7 of them, or you write off the last game and play an unchanged side. Injuries and everything permitting, of course. I mean, there was talk that Nick Pope might well be fit enough to make the journey. Does he sit? If he is, does he sit on the bench or does he come straight back in the team? Well, if you made only one change, Andrew, and it was dropping Dubravka for Pope, I know you let 4 in, but by Joe, how did the 2 England young boys playing at fullback and were 2 centre halves, or shall we say were 3 centre halves because we changed it half time? I mean, do you not think they had something to do with it as well? And if Dubravka was the only guy dropped from that display after what he's done previously, and the fact that he's agreed to stay under great persuasion from us because we're in a mess, that would be harsh in the extreme, wouldn't it?
It would, and he made 2 or 3 excellent saves against Bournemouth to keep the score down to 4 as well. So let's not forget that. I guess the only real question about the starting 11 is whether Botman or Byrne drop out and Fabian Schär comes in. Obviously, as you mentioned, Botman substituted at half time. Fabian Schär came in, but Schär wasn't necessarily an improvement on Botman. No one, as you said, really left that pitch on Saturday against Bournemouth with their head held high, other than maybe Sandro Tonali. Would you keep Botman and Byrne, or would you bring in Fabian Schär and drop one of those?
Great question. And that, apart from the goalkeeper, which mightn't arise, and I would stick with Dubravka even if it did arise. I mean, I thought that was a great opportunity for Schär to say, listen, pal, this is my shirt. I've always been the right-sided centre-half, and I'm going to continue to be the right-sided centre-half. He wasn't any better, and Botman is a very good player. So I think I can't justify Shaw getting it ahead of Botman, apart from the fact that he's more naturally right-sided. But I think I would just stick, as we said at the start of this conversation, with the same side.
I would stick with the same side, but I think Eddie Howe may bring Fabian Schär back in and just put Botman on the bench. I think will happen.
Yeah, could easily, and I wouldn't particularly be doing backwards somersaults in despair if that happened, because I think you can flick a coin on the normal situation. And as I say, what Shaw's got going for him, he's naturally right-sided and has played there all the time. Botman's moved over there, so him and Byrne can play. I mean, Byrne gave the ball away under no pressure whatsoever, horrendously the whole game. But we're not talking about dropping him, because if we did for that, didn't everybody else? I mean, Gordon was doing it. I mean, Murphy was back to the Murphy we knew of old from way back. I mean, you could drop every one of them outside of perhaps Tonali, and to a certain extent Bruno, even though his pocket was picked for one of the goals. So, you know, just let's put Bournemouth to bed and pretend it didn't happen and go in with the same side again, but with a hugely different attitude.
I think that's the key takeaways from the Bournemouth game. As good as Bournemouth were with the intensity and the high pressing, Newcastle United really gifted them 2, maybe 3 of the goals. And, you know, Southampton can look at how Bournemouth defeated Newcastle, and they can maybe adopt a high pressing approach to the game. But the bottom line is, you know, Newcastle United can deal with anything as long as they're just careful in possession. And that's something I think Eddie Howe will be really trying to hit home this week, is that it doesn't matter what the opposition do. It doesn't matter what we do, essentially, because if we keep giving the ball away, we're going to get punished. I think it's going back to basics in many ways. It's handling the ball correctly, not playing with it like it's a grenade and giving it away, especially to players who will punish you. I mean, Southampton don't have that many players like Bournemouth do, but I think Eddie Howe would have been absolutely raging when he looked back at this game and just saw the amount of errors in and out of possession, because it was just not good enough. And I think he'll be going back to basics this week.
Yes, I mean, as you say, we weren't. They had a high press, they were great, etc., etc. But I was watching the ball given away when nobody was around our man on the ball. I mean, they weren't pressurized into passing it wildly. They just passed it wildly. I mean, it was absolutely frightening. And they had good players and quick players who took advantage of that. By the way, Southampton have scored 15 league goals all season, which is the lowest in all the top 5 divisions, not just the Premier League. That's going down to the National League that Gates are playing. Now, have they got good enough players to take advantage of us? Not as many as Bournemouth had, but we've got to get back to passing accurately over distance when not under pressure. I mean, that's frightening. And it didn't just happen on a couple of occasions, Andrew, as you would see with as well as me and all 50,000 Geordies that were there and the rest who saw it on television later. We were sloppy as can be on the ball. I mean, it was incredible. But again, I've got to keep dragging myself back to the fact that, we weren't in a run of 9 defeats and then got 1 win. We were in a run of 9 wins and then 1 defeat. So there should be a lot more optimism there than there would if it was the other way around. There's one big blip, but before that, it was good going, and we should get back to what we were.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I think if you can put right what went wrong against Bournemouth, i.e., you're careless in possession, too many men not following the men that they were supposed to be. Jacob Murphy, for example, for the first goal, Anthony Gordon for Kirkes' goal right at the end. The basic errors, because if you do them right, then the rest will follow. Because if you follow your man when you're needing to defend, then you stop the attack, and then you can go on and attack them. And if you're careful in possession, then you can, create the chances that will get you the goals. And it sounds very simple to say, but it is that simple. What helped Bournemouth on Saturday was that Newcastle United, the two basic principles, they were very, very poor at, and Bournemouth were excellent, but they were aided by Newcastle mistakes in both areas of play there. And we're talking here, John, about how Newcastle should win. Southampton are awful, 6 points, 1 win in 35. The new manager hasn't had that bounce that you sometimes get. How fine of a line is it, though, from being arrogant within the expectation and being realistic with the expectation?
We've got to be realistic, but we cannot be fearful. If we at all are fearful of going to Southampton, what are we doing talking about playing in the Champions League? What are we doing talking about being in a Wembley showpiece final if we're scared of going to Southampton? However, what we have to do when we go to Southampton is make certain we get it right. Because while it is a great opportunity to climb back on the horse, having fallen off, it is also the other thing. Can you imagine if we lost at Southampton, how our bubble would be pricked? How then we would have panic stations and bells going and everything else, because that would be a serious setback. We're only 90 minutes away from getting back on the horse, but we're only 90 minutes away from it being a disaster as well. We've got to make certain a disaster doesn't happen, because Southampton will almost feel they've got a free swing at us because they're going down anyway. They've only got 6 points. They're not going to get out of this. Absolutely no way. But catching Newcastle on the back of 4, they're at home. Let's have a swing at it. You never know what might happen. Newcastle cannot afford to face a defeat. A draw would be a poor result, but a defeat is unthinkable. And if we go about the game the right way with the quality of players we have, we don't get that defeat.
Yeah, but important as well not to underestimate Southampton or disrespect them and think that we're going to turn up and get all 3 points. But at the same time, I don't think there's anything wrong in expecting Newcastle with their talent and the form minus the Bournemouth game to go down there and get 3 points. Because, as I said earlier on, I think it is unthinkable that anything other than victory occurs. Do you think, John, that Eddie Howe will be slightly disappointed, maybe even a bit more than slightly, that the subs that he brought on against Bournemouth, it didn't affect the game in any stretch of the imagination? Every single one of them was really, really poor. So it's not like he can get into this week. And if he was thinking about changing it up, because someone played particularly bad in his mind and he thought, well, that's it, I just want to take him out of the fight. And let's say Team Livramento, for example, or Lewis Hall, it's not like he can look at Kieran Trippier's cameo against Bournemouth and go, oh, he set the world alight there. He's given me something to think about. It's not like he can look at Joe Willock if he wants to take Joe Linton out, for example, and rest him and go, yeah, he gave me something to think about, because none of them did at all. And I think Eddie Howe will be concerned, actually, that none of them managed to at least impress a little bit, because let's be honest, the bar wasn't set very high against Bournemouth to even impress them.
Absolutely. And this is what I said, when everybody was getting carried away, I don't mean you, I mean Big Al and all those, and we're going to charge for the title. I said to you on this last week, the reason why, before Bournemouth, the reason why we're not going to go for the title, apart from Liverpool having a 9-point lead in a game in hand, is the simple fact that our subs bench is not good enough. And we haven't got strength and depth. The subs made no difference against Bournemouth, but Andrew, a few days later, we lost our way against Wolves when the subs come on. We were 3-0 and comfortable, but we lost our way when the subs come on. We have got, and I said, if we qualify for the Champions League or Europe in any shape or form, we have a problem unless we buy next summer, because our subs aren't good enough. And the worry that I've got right now in the transfer market, and we were told by Eddie it would be quiet, and by Jove, it has been quiet. You could hear a pin drop, couldn't you? But we were told it was going to be like this. The one thing that concerns me right now is that if Almiron goes to America, if Kelly goes to Juventus, if Longstaff goes absolutely anywhere where he's wanted, if anybody goes at all, and we are not don't buy someone to come in, then we've weakened the current squad, haven't we? I mean, we're wondering if it can happen now. We're saying we haven't got good subs, but if Almiron goes or Kelly goes or Longstaff goes and nobody comes in, we are weaker. We might have got some money that's going to help us in the summer, but what's going to help us to win the Carabao Cup or to get into Europe? We are going to be even weaker than we are now when we consider ourselves weak. We think we've got a good starting 11, but nothing much underneath that. So my worry is, of course, Almiron's expendable. Longstaff has already been put in that position. Kelly hasn't done anything yet, first team wise. So if you look at, we can let Elliot Anderson go in Minter, who had not played for us. Theoretically, you could let Kelly go, but not if nobody's going to come in. I mean, it's no good getting to the summer and saying, right, we've got money off those guys, now we can have a real splurge. But oh dear me, we didn't win the Carabao Cup and we're not in Europe in the summer. That's a step backwards. So we've got to be careful of what this window's about. But getting back to what you originally said, our trouble is that when Eddie makes changes, they don't produce an impact. They do not produce an impact. In the guys that come on, whether it was experienced people like Sean Willock or whether it's inexperienced like Isula, it doesn't change anything. In fact, I would go as far as to say that recently it's made it a bit worse.
Well, it's not just recent, it's mainly the entirety of the season. We've heard Eddie Howe admit several times that the subs have made the team worse when they were introduced. Obviously, the Wolves game, I spoke about being happy with the depth, and I think it's a lot easier to make the substitutions when you're 3-0 up, and your level can drop off a little bit, but it's not as you're not as hurt as much by it, as you were when you're chasing the game against Bournemouth. But yeah, no game changes whatsoever. Interesting, you mentioned there about the potential exits of Almiron and Lloyd Kelly and Sean Longstaff. I think if Sean Longstaff ended up going, which I don't think he will this January, I think they would definitely then move to bring someone in. I think if Miggy goes, I don't think they will bring anyone in unless it's a loan deal with an obligation somewhere down the line. I can't see Lloyd Kelly going. I think Eddie Howe will be putting his foot down on that one, even though it would be pure profit. I just cannot see him letting Lloyd Kelly go, even if the US come back in 25 million.
There's a couple of things to say on that one. First of all, what Eddie wants and puts his foot down, which is nobody ever to leave, he sometimes gets overruled by the money man because it's got to happen, and he got overruled on Elliot Anderson and he got overruled on Minter. If something's got to happen, it's got to happen. I can understand why he wouldn't want it to happen. The interesting thing, if Longstaff or Almiron went, and I agree that I don't think Longstaff will happen in January, but I mean, theoretically, you could say when Longstaff goes, because I think he'll go in the summer, you can say that it's 100% profit because he's through the academy, and you can say, if you want to say, that both Miley and Willock are ahead of Longstaff in the pecking order now, for the midfield positions, and if you look at how many minutes Longstaff has had since Christmas, he is becoming the new Almiron. The guy that never plays, that sits on the bench but is hardly ever called on. If Almiron goes, we are more vulnerable at outside right if Almiron goes than we are in midfield if Longstaff goes, because there's Miley and Willock to back up the three guys that's got the position now. But still, we both agree numerically we can't afford people to go this window and nobody to come in, because by definition it means we've weakened the squad, and we've still got great ambition for this season in Europe and in the Carabao Cup final. So we can't allow that to happen unless we're going to buy in. But if we do make Europe, we've all got to sort something out in the summer, Andrew, because there's the depth to take on everything we've took on. I mean, we're supposed to be mentally tired or physically tired at the moment, and that was one of the things put forward by Eddie, and I've agreed with the mental part of it against Bournemouth. If we're physically tired now, what are we going to be like if we're playing in Europe as well as the two domestic cups in the league? We've got to have a deeper squad. And when we said that, when I said that the subs recently have shown, what I meant was against Wolves, of course, at 3-0 were okay, but you would think they would come on and show something to say, look, I'm still around, give me a chance. We got a warning with the subs displays against Wolves that they would be poor against Bournemouth, and it was confirmed when the subs come on, they were poor against Bournemouth.
I think we got a warning throughout the game against Wolves what was to come at Bournemouth, because that scoreline could have been a hell of a lot different. But let me put this to you, John. If you are told right now, and we are recording this on Wednesday, it'll come out on Thursday morning, so by the time you hear this and watch this, something might have changed. Just bear that in mind with this question. But if you were told right now, John, that Miguel Almiron, the deal was done to go, £11 million, he's going, he's gone, he wants to go, all done and dusted, all that needs is you to sign it off and he'll be away. But Newcastle United are not going to bring in a replacement, what would you do?
That's a brilliant question, because I think it's the one exception from everything I've been saying, which is don't let anybody out unless you get somebody in. We would still have time to get somebody in if we had the inclination to do it. But every transfer window that passes, Almiron's value sinks. And if we don't sell him this January, he's going to be worth peanuts in the summer. I also think that he's shattered the poor lad about the way things are and has just resigned to going. And I think he looks, wetter than a blanket on the line in the rain. He's already gone, if you know what I mean. And that's what worries me as well about Longstaff. And I think we're to keep Longstaff this January, don't get me wrong. But his body language tells me he's almost resigned, Andrew, that he's going to go, if not this window, in the next window. And as a local lad, he's terribly depressed about that. And the Vavavoom is nowhere near there now. And all of a sudden, Miley's gone ahead of him. And it's almost like he feels he's sitting in the plane with his parachute on, and he's going to jump out of the plane after Almiron, and is going to be told he is, regardless. But I mean, you've got to let Almiron go because the opportunity is there. Now, don't ask me what then happens and why Newcastle don't do this and don't do that because of financial fair play, because it seems as if we could buy the England centre half from Crystal Palace in the last window. We had the money if they would have done the deal, and then all of a sudden the money's not available in this window because we're looking towards the next window. With this word financial fair play is like the bogeyman, isn't it? It's used to scare us whenever anything's happening. How could we buy Geehy then, but not buy anybody now? That's what fans are asking, and no doubt the accountant has got a reason why. Eddie won't explain it because he feels like us. He can't explain it because he doesn't know it in depth enough. He just agrees with the money men when they tell him that's the way it is. But I wish somebody would explain it. I mean, if we get rid of Almiron in the morning and it's supposed to be that close, then surely we can get somebody in before the window closes, because surely we've done all our scouting for an outside right, for a cover centre forward, for a centre half already. Surely we know who we want and who's available and who isn't, and how much we'd pay, whether we do it or not. We must have done our homework.
I think they probably would have done their homework, but then you've got the January inflated prices and also the very real nightmare of PSR creeping over your shoulder for June the 30th. I think Newcastle are very, very cautious about that. If Almiron goes, I can't see anybody coming in, and I can understand them being, I can understand them being cautious because you don't want to get stung and then face a point deduction next season. But for me, looking at what Newcastle United can do, and they haven't got the wealth to spend this January, that is quite clear. But I think there will be a little pot of money there should something arise. So maybe it's a loan deal where they pay $4 million for somebody, and then the obligation to buy in the summer is there. So that's one option. But also, there's Morgan Whittaker, who is down at Plymouth. And look, Plymouth are bottom of the Championship. I get it, okay? But 23 goals last season in the Championship. And he was linked to a move to Aston Villa in the summer. He's then suffered an injury, and he's only just getting back to fitness. But he's going to head to Middlesbrough for an initial £5 million, right? If Newcastle United are struggling to spend because they don't want to get bitten by PSR, I think doing a deal like that for a player who's clearly got ability, that is a kind of gambling risk I would take to get you through to the summer. Even look, he's not going to be Champions League quality, but he's a new face. He's competition for Jacob Murphy. He's young, okay, he's 24, but he knows where the goal is, at least in the Championship. So why not take a punt on that? Middlesbrough have got a good record of doing deals like this. I mean, you look at Morgan Rogers and look what's happened to him at Villa.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I would be all over that deal for Morgan Whittaker. It's a gamble that won't cost Newcastle very much. If it doesn't work, you still probably sell him for a profit anyway, because he's at Newcastle United, he's a Premier League player. That's the dice I would be rolling this January.
Yeah, and I can absolutely understand that theory, Andrew, and I would love them to do something. What I think they'll do, is the same as you do. I think nobody will come in. They'll sell Almiron, nobody will come in, and they'll gamble on Barnes coming back and being able to wiggle Barnes and Gordon on the two wings and Isak through the middle in the prayer mat that nobody's injured. I think that's the road they'll go down. It's not the road I want them to go down, but I'm bemused about this financial fair play, because why, they're terrified of war and shadow, or it's the worst thing that's ever happened, or we're not certain how it works. And when Eddie Howe says he's not certain how it works, how can we understand it? I mean, I'm not, again, we'll go back to fans saying, how could we buy the Palace centre half at around 70 million? Because when in the next window, having spent nothing, we all of a sudden haven't got any money because we're worried about a points deduction. Well, we're not going to get a points deduction after we spent the 70 million. I mean, it doesn't add up in logic unless somebody from Newcastle United would please explain it publicly. but evidently not explained it that much to Eddie. Or Eddie thinks it's so complicated. I'll accept the fact and get on with the job, which is big enough. But this is diverting away from Southampton. We beat Southampton regardless of the bench.
Fingers crossed you are right. And we've done a special podcast with Wish PLC's own football finance expert, David Powell. And you can go back on the YouTube channel. It was the last episode before this one and catch up with what Dave had to say about Newcastle's finances. Very, very insightful, very eye-opening, actually. Numbers do get the better of me, John. And I had lots of questions for Dave, and he explained it very well. I think a lot of you guys and girls, if you haven't watched it, will enjoy it and be left, after having watched or listened to it, feeling confident about the summer to come. And kind of look at the bigger picture, which I think a lot of Newcastle United fans are doing. Of course, there's a frustration about this window and the window gone last summer, but it seems like it's all part of the plan and the logic is there. And then come the summer, the shackles are going to come off and we're going to see Newcastle United move up a gear. Fingers crossed that happens. But yeah, there's a tip for you. Morgan Whittaker, I'd get him signed. And Burnley going for the Premier League, John, their position there after him as well. And, he's the man to carry them up to the top flight. I think he's definitely worth a gamble. But let me know in the comments your thoughts.
If they think John Joe Shelby's going to carry them up to the top flight, there again, but everybody's got an Achilles heel.
Well, I didn't see that one coming. Yes, you're correct on that. Let's not go back and shine on Joe Shelby, who has been actually, his family and everything's up on Tyneside. This is where he's been since he's returned from Turkey. And another player who's settled here and calling it home after his time in Newcastle is done, which is lovely to see. So Troy Deeney, if you're watching, Newcastle is a brilliant place to live, and I hope if you ever do visit, you'll change your mind on your stinking opinion about the place. But anyway, enough of that. How is Saturday going to go, John?
Well, I'm going to say we're going to win because everything is logic tells me we're going to win. Man for man, we have a better player in every position. Some would say maybe not in goal with Ramsdale and Dubrovka. Maybe that's even how Ramsdale was England goalkeeper cover not that long ago, ahead of Pope. But there's nobody that I would be desperate to get, apart from the young kid's a good player, but he's not playing because he's injured. So we've got the better players. Their record, 6 points, 1 win, all season so far. We have 9 wins out the last 10 games. There ought to be, if everything was sane, and often not sane, it should be an away win. And the law of averages is the only thing that says it wouldn't happen because we've won 4 away games on the trot, and this would be 5 if you include the League Cup with Arsenal. So can we do that? That's mind-boggling. But you've got to say yes. You can't be afraid of your own shadow. Otherwise, you wouldn't enjoy football because every match is a challenge. But this is the least challenge in the Premier League, is it not? On paper, in the way you get beat at Southampton is if you drop off on attitude, confidence, work rate, all the things that ought to be a given. Natural ability is if you match them on the things I've just mentioned, then you beat them on your ability. And I'm taking Newcastle to win.
Me too. I think Newcastle United will win, hopefully quite comfortably, and they'll score quite a few goals and put to bed that defeat to Bournemouth, and leads them into what will be a testing game against Fulham, of course, just a couple of days before Arsenal visit St James's Park in the second leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final. Nearly said final leg, getting ahead of myself. But I think the Southampton game is a really important one because what it does, it kind of, it's the first chapter of what is an important 3 games for Newcastle United. You win against Southampton, you forget what happened against Bournemouth, and you come bouncing into the game against Fulham. You lose to Southampton, you face a Fulham side who are good, kind of on the level of Bournemouth, and then obviously it's Arsenal. So this Southampton game really sets the tone, I think, for what is to come, and in particular maybe that Arsenal game as well, because you want them going into those 2 games full of confidence. As always, ladies and gents, this episode was sponsored by NordVPN. You know what to do by now. Click the link in your podcast description box to take advantage of a very heavily discounted offer exclusive to our listeners and viewers here at Everything is Black and White podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Thank you to John for providing the match preview. John will be back next week to look ahead to Fulham. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your week. Hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave us a rating and review, and we shall see you guys very, very soon.